Hi, welcome back. Well, it's no secret that Christianity is declining in the West. Church attendance is lower than ever, and the numbers of people who declare in surveys and censuses who say they have no religion is steadily climbing. Here to help us understand what's going wrong and hopefully how to fix it is Dr. Barry Oliver. How are you, Barry?
Oh, well, thank you, Ken.
So, Barry, you're a church leader. You represent Seventh-day Adventists in Australia, New Zealand and across the South Pacific Islands. So are you, as a church leader, one of the people we should be, blaming for this decline in Christianity?
Oh, Ken, you made me take a deep breath then. But I guess the answer is, of course.
Yeah.
As a leader, I must bear responsibility. We all together must bear responsibility because we don't want this to be happening. This wasn't Jesus' idea, I'm sure.
Well, certainly not.
Because I saw some research just the other day where, in fact, in Australia, for example, and I know some of our viewers come from New Zealand, across the Pacific and elsewhere, but in Australia, the number of people who actually identify with Christianity has declined in the last 5 years from 62% to 52%.
Wow.
At the same time, the number of people who declare no religion in that 5-year period has increased from about 29% up to about 37%. So both of those lines are converging, if I can get the directions right, in the way we as Christians certainly don't want.
So what's putting them off? Do you get a sense that you know why?
Kent, if we all knew why and had all the answers, I don't think it would be happening like it is. It's a very challenging question because Jesus' idea, of course, was that the gospel would go to all the world.
Yeah, sure.
People would have an opportunity to listen, to accept, to respond. It would go in such a way as it was appealing. It would go in such a way as it was culturally relevant. It would go in such a way as Christians show that they are quite capable of rolling up their shirt sleeves and getting involved in the community, doing all those things that Christians should do. But for some reason, it's well, let me not say it's not working, but it's certainly not working as we wish it was.
But, I mean, church attendance levels are at record lows, but nevertheless, as you just alluded to, 52% of Australians, for example, still consider themselves Christian. And I believe the rates of people who believe that there is a God is even higher. Is that your understanding?
That's really interesting, Kent. I remember years ago I was teaching at Avondale College up on the Central Coast. And at that time, the number of people who were identifying with Christianity was in the high 60s. But the number of people who actually believed in the supernatural, in God, if you like, was closer to 90%.
Yeah, wow.
I think the challenge for us is that many people are still identifying with the supernatural, with God, but not wanting to identify with traditional Christian church.
It's this whole I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, and that's a challenge. And I wish I had the answer. I sometimes wish I could stand up on a street corner and say to her, hey, do you guys really know what this is all about? But that doesn't work because people in Australia don't want to listen to someone particularly standing on a street corner. They are much more impressed by someone, as I said a minute ago, rolling up their shirt sleeves, demonstrating what Christianity really is like, I guess, in action.
And is that the key, do you think, for contemporary Christians today to figure out how not just to talk the talk but to actually to live it?
I think that's certainly part of it, Kent, a very big part of it. Another thing is Australians, and we're talking about Australia particularly, and this will vary across the different cultures and countries. Australians are very impressed by people who are, and to use an old phrase, fair income.
Yes.
People who are people of integrity. Australians aren't so interested in listening to fancy political or philosophical debate.
Sure.
They want to know that something works and they can see it in the life of a person by what they say, what they do. They're more convinced by the power of a person's integrity than by the power of an argument.
That's right.
That's pretty much how we are in Australia.
It's not tell me what you believe. Show me what you believe by your actions.
Every day, and who you are.
Yeah.
You've got to be a person who is able to stand up for what you believe. I've heard so many stories about Christians, maybe in the workplace or on the sporting field, who are a little different because of their belief system from others who might be around them. And people accept that as fine. And that's a good thing about us.
Australians are very accepting, aren't they?
We are really. accept people, we give the underdog a fair go. I hope that never disappears from Australian culture. Sometimes I also hear stories of Christians who do it tough, but ultimately I think we Australians are fairly fair-minded, and even if you don't agree with what I think, I'll still accept you and be prepared to call you a friend or a mate.
Yeah, sure. I guess there does come a time, though, doesn't there, Barry, where you do need to speak and you do need to explain, and whether publicly or whether it's one-on-one. Are there perhaps some pitfalls that we've seen from the past of, evangelistic methods or ways of sharing the gospel that we just thought, well, that's actually not ethical? Because unfortunately Christians are famous for that, aren't they? The bait and switch. I'll promise you this, and then guess what? It's religion. You didn't see that coming, did you?
Unfortunately, Kent, that has been the case on a number of occasions. Not always, of course, but it's very important that when Christians do share their faith, that they do it in a way that is ethical, a way where people are aware. We're not catching people at a time when they're extremely vulnerable, for example. Now, it is true that often at a time when we are vulnerable, we ourselves can reach out to God and realise He is there at those sort of times.
We're open to change.
But the end never justifies the means, if you know what I mean. We must be very careful and respect the freedom of choice of all individuals to make choices for themselves. And in turn, as Christians, we expect that to be granted to us as well. Freedom of choices is something we must hold on to as a culture and as a people always. Maintaining, of course, community mores, standards, etc., which we expect in Australia.
A word that's being thrown around a bit, Barry, is the word incarnational. It's a word that's thrown around in Christian circles in particular. Can you just sort of explain to us what that means exactly and then what it looks like?
The word incarnation describes the fact that Jesus, who of course is God in the fullest sense, became man in the fullest sense, unique. And to be incarnational basically is to follow the example of Jesus, who became one of us for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of salvation. So in sharing who we are, we can become one with others, identifying with them in order to share the gospel where they are, so they can become what...
Do you know people who are doing this, like now in Australia, for example, or in other countries?
I think there are many, many people doing this. I think many of our friends in the Salvation Army do this very well. They really roll up their shirt sleeves. They go where many others wouldn't go in order to reach people who are in need. And many other Christians right across the board in all the churches are doing this. Great. I think that is something we need to do more.
So this is sort of in opposition to the attractional model, isn't it, where I sit in a church, I put a big poster out the front and I say, come to us, come hear the gospel. The incarnational model is about me leaving the church walls behind and actually getting out to the community and being a part of that community.
It's very interesting, Kent. In the Old Testament, the attractional model was the model of Israel, where everyone was to come to Jerusalem, for example. In the New Testament, the model was to go out into all the world and go out in order to make disciples, being like Jesus.
It's more relevant than ever, I guess, the example of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for your time today, Barry.
Thanks, Kent.
Really appreciate it. We'll be back straight after the break.